The Buddha and the Arahant. Why is the Buddha considered the supreme enlightened one? In the Gopaka-Moggallana Sutta, a Brahmin asks the Venerable Ananda whether there is a single monk who is completely endowed with all the qualities with which the Buddha is endowed. Ananda replies that there is not a single monk who is so endowed. In this paper, an attempt is made to compare the attainments of the Buddha with those of the Arahant, with a view to ascertain wherein the two differ. Both the Buddha and the Arahants are recognized as equal as far as the attainment of the final goal of Nibbana is concerned. The principal difference is that the Buddha is the pioneer, the discoverer of the undiscovered path, while the Arahants are followers who tread the path mapped out by the pioneering Buddha. The Kula-Gopalaka Sutta uses a slightly different allegory. It compares the Buddha to a clever cowherd who gets his herd to cross a deep river from a safe ford. Later, Buddhist texts elucidate the pioneership of the Buddha with lucid descriptions of how he spent incalculable periods of time practicing and perfecting the virtues called parami, which gave him the intellectual and emotional maturity to discover the long-forgotten path to Nibbana. But it is specifically stated that the Buddha did not preach all that he understood during the process of preparation. What he preached is compared to a handful of leaves, whereas what he understood but refrained from teaching is like the leaves in the forest. The Buddha also maintains that he preached the Dhamma in its entirety without any reservations. What is meant by these superficially contradictory statements seems to be that the Buddha taught everything useful and relevant for emancipation, but kept strictly aside everything that was useless and irrelevant for that purpose. This position is reiterated in the canon in a number of suttas. The Buddha clearly defined the scope of his teaching and strictly confined himself to the problem of suffering and its elimination. Levels of attainment among Arahants. The Buddha's standpoint can be illustrated with the help of a simile. He was like a lonely man who was lost in the fearful wilderness of samsara and earnestly sought a way out. As he had to spend a long time in this vast, terrible forest, he had to learn a great deal about the forest itself. To survive, he had to learn about edible and poisonous plants and fruits. He had to learn the habits and habitats of wild animals. He had to climb trees in order to discover in which direction there were signs of a human settlement, etc. But at long last, when he did discover a straight path leading out of the wilderness, he thought, quite rightly, that it was a waste of time to teach about the ways of the forest to others who are also lost in the wilderness. It is most useful and urgent if he devoted his time and energy to point out the path to other suffering beings. This is exactly the function of a Buddha. Therefore, he refrained from teaching what was irrelevant to emancipation. This clearly shows that the Buddha is far superior to other Arahants regarding knowledge about matters not directly related to Nibbana. Among Arahants, too, there are differences in attainment. In one place, the Buddha states that in a group of 500 monks, 60 are Arahants with the 6 higher knowledges, Chalapanya. 60 are Arahants with the 3 clear knowledges, Tavijja. Another 60 are Arahants liberated from both parts, Ubhatobhagavimuta, while the rest are Arahants liberated by wisdom, Panyavimuta. 1. The highest qualifications among Arahants are the 6 higher knowledges, Chalabhinya, and the 4 analytical knowledges, Katupatisampida. The former comprise psychic powers, the divine ear, thought reading, retrocognition, the ability to recall one's former births, clairvoyance, the ability to see beings dying and being reborn according to their karma, and the knowledge of the destruction of defilements. The 4 analytical knowledges comprise insight into the meaning of words, atha, truth, dhamma, use of language, niruddhi, and originality of ideas, padabhana. They seem to pivot around the ability to teach the Dhamma through the medium of verbal communication with appealing and meaningful ways of presentation. 2. Arahants of lesser attainments have only 3 higher knowledges: retrocognition, clairvoyance, and the knowledge of the destruction of defilements. 3. Still, other Arahants attain emancipation from both parts, ubhatobhagavi mutta. They have gained emancipation from the body, rupakaya, by the physical experience and complete mastery of 8 deliverances, vimokkha, or supernormal states of consciousness, and emancipation from the mind, namakaya, through the destruction of defilements. 4. Arahants who are released through wisdom have only the knowledge of the destruction of defilements. As a common denominator, all Arahants have panya vimutti, also called akupa seto vimutti, imperturbable mental freedom. The 10 Tathagata Bala powers of the Buddha. While the highest qualities attainable by an Arahant are certainly found in the Buddha, the suttas assign additional qualifications to the Buddha that are not shared by other Arahants. The Mahasihanada Sutta describes 10 special powers of the Buddha called Tathagata Bala. They are tabulated below and will be taken up for discussion in comparison with the attainments of Arahants. Endowed with these 10 powers, the Buddha claims a position of supreme eminence, asabham thanam patijanati. He is fearless in facing any audience or critic. The text metaphorically states that he roars like a lion in assemblies, parisasu sihanadam nadati. He exercises supreme authority among human beings, brahmakakam pavateti. The 10 powers are as follows. 1. He knows realistically a possibility as a possibility and an impossibility as an impossibility. 2. He knows realistically the causally connected results of all actions, whether they belong to the past, present, or future. 3. He knows realistically the course of action leading to all states of existence. 4. He knows realistically all worlds composed of various and diverse elements. 5. He knows realistically the various spiritual propensities or dispositions of human beings. 6. He knows realistically the maturity levels of the spiritual faculties of various human beings. 7. He knows realistically the attainment of superconscious meditational levels such as jhana, vimokkha, samadhi, and samapatti, together with the defilements and purities associated with them and the means of rising from these states. 8. He has retrocognitive powers extending up to several eons, with the ability to recall details regarding past existences. 9. He has clairvoyant powers with the ability to see beings dying and being reborn in high or low states according to their own karma. 10. He has attained knowledge of the complete destruction of all defilements in this very life. These will be taken up for discussion in comparison with the attainments of Arahants, in reverse order, as it seems to be clearer and more convenient to do so. 10. The Buddha shares the last of the Tathagata Balas with all other Arahants, and there seems to be no difference between the Buddha and the Arahants regarding emancipation. 8 and 9. Arahants with the triple and sixfold higher knowledge share with the Buddha the retrocognitive and clairvoyant abilities, but there seems to be a difference in proficiency and extent of vision. The Buddha seems to have unlimited retrocognitive and clairvoyant abilities, as he says that he can see as far as he wishes to see, yavad eva akankami. 7. The Buddha shares his mastery over superconscious meditational levels with the Ubhatobhaga Vimutta Arahant, who can attain the 8 deliverances, Atha Vimokkha, in progressive order, regressive order, and in both progressive and regressive orders. He can attain whatever he wishes, whenever he wishes, for any length of time he wishes, and can also rise from them at will. 5 and 6. These are special aspects of thought reading, Cetopariyajnana. Though Arahants with Shalabhijna are said to have the ability of thought reading, nowhere is it stated in the Pali Canon that Arahants can discern the spiritual propensities and maturity levels of the spiritual faculties of other individuals. This seems to be a special province of the Buddha alone. Much evidence could be gathered from the Pali Canon in support of this special ability of the Buddha. Seeing the spiritual maturity of Angulimala, Sunita, and Alavaka, the Buddha approached them on his own initiative. He preached to them, and they gained lasting spiritual distinction. There is not a single instance of an Arahant approaching a prospective saint with prior knowledge of his spiritual potentialities. According to the Udana, the Buddha saw the spiritual potential of a poor leper named Supa Buddha and preached a sermon that was particularly appealing to him. At the end of the discourse, he became a Sotapanna, a stream enterer. According to the Kulara Hulovada Sutta, the Buddha saw that Rahula was mature and ready for further instruction. He preached to Rahula about the nature of sense faculties, sense data, and their interaction. At the end of this discourse, it is reported that Rahula attained arahantship. Countless other examples could be cited: 2, 3, and 4. These seem to be specialities connected with clairvoyance, Dibakaku. They show that the Buddha possesses a worldview far superior to that of the Arahants. With clairvoyance, Arahants realize only one aspect, the truth of Kama, which is so helpful for understanding man's samsaric condition. The Buddha's clairvoyance encompasses knowledge regarding the external world as well. Therefore, he knows realistically the worlds with various and diverse elements. Perhaps this means that he has understood the universe comprising gross physical realms such as the human world, fine material realms such as the Brahma worlds, and non-material realms such as the Arupa world. He also knows the type of action which leads to rebirth in these various worlds, and he has understood the perennial laws pertaining to these worlds. His clairvoyant vision reaches so far back that he has recorded in the Mahapadana Sutta details regarding the lives of 6 previous Buddhas, much to the admiration of his followers. In fact, as mentioned earlier in this essay, the Buddha's clairvoyant powers seem limitless. 1. This special power of knowing a possibility as a possibility and an impossibility as an impossibility is never mentioned as a knowledge of the Arahant. The Buddha may have left the undetermined abhyakata problems unanswered because he was utterly convinced by this special form of insight that it is not only useless but impossible for unenlightened beings to know the solutions to those problems. Besides the 10 Tathagatabalas, the Mahasihanada Sutta enumerates 4 confidences, Kata'ari Vesarajani, enjoyed by the Buddha alone. He has the absolute confidence that no human or superhuman being can reasonably accuse him: A. Of not being fully enlightened, B. Of not being free of all mental defilements, C. Of wrongly declaring as dangers things that are not really dangerous, D. Of preaching a doctrine that does not lead to the goal it professes to lead to. Endowed with this absolute confidence, the Buddha claims supreme eminence and authority among gods and men that no Arahant could ever claim. Ten Powers of the Arahant. The Anguttara Nikaya enumerates 10 powers of the Arahant, and they all seem to pivot around the practice and realization of the Dhamma. 1. An Arahant sees all component things as impermanent. 2. He sees all sense pleasures as a pit of burning embers. 3. His mind is inclined towards seclusion and renunciation. 4. He has developed the 4 stations of mindfulness. 5. He has developed the 4-fold right exertion. 6. He has developed the 4 bases of psychic powers. 7. He has developed the 5 spiritual faculties. 8. He has developed the 5 spiritual powers. 9. He has developed the 7 factors of enlightenment. 10. He has developed the noble 8-fold path. Endowed with these powers, a monk can claim to have destroyed all mental defilements. When compared with the powers and confidences of the Buddha, these center around the theme of one's own individual emancipation. The Buddha, on the other hand, wields far greater powers which can even be called universal, with insight into the spiritual potential of other individuals and a worldview far superior to that of Arahants. It is appropriate to compare the epithets that normally describe an Arahant with those applied to the Buddha. Suttas describe an Arahant as kinasavo, one whose mental defilements are destroyed; Vusitava, one who has successfully lived the higher life; Katakaraniyo, one whose duty is done; Ohitabharo, one who has laid the burden aside; Anupatasadattho, one who has attained the noble goal; Parikinabhavasamyojano, one who has destroyed all bonds leading to further existences; and Samadanya Vimuto, one who has attained emancipation with right knowledge. All these epithets describe aspects of the personal emancipation of the Arahant. Though all these epithets can rightly be applied to the Buddha, they are hardly used with reference to him, as it is not just his personal emancipation that makes him unique. Epithets of the Buddha versus the Arahant. The Buddha's fame spread in terms of 9 other epithets. He is called Arahant, as he is the worthy one who does no evil even in secret; Samasambuddho, because he is fully enlightened and self-enlightened; Vijakaranasampano, because he is endowed with knowledge and virtuous conduct; Sugato, because he successfully reached the goal as a pioneer; Lokavidu, because he has understood the universe with its world systems; Purisa Dhamma Sarathi, because he is the champion tamer of human beings; Satha Deva Manusanam, because he is the teacher of gods and men; Buddha, because he has awakened to reality; Bhagava, because he is the fortunate one, the blessed one, the Lord. Though a few of these epithets could be attributed to the Arahant as well, this group of 9 epithets collectively expresses the praiseworthy qualities of the Buddha alone. In their totality, they can never be applied to an Arahant. To emphasize his superiority, the Buddha himself declares that even those monks who are liberated in mind and who have achieved unsurpassed vision, unsurpassed practice, and unsurpassed liberation still honor, respect, esteem, and worship the Buddha. The reason is, the Blessed One is enlightened and teaches the Dhamma for enlightenment. He is tamed and teaches the Dhamma for taming. He is at peace and teaches the Dhamma for peace. He has attained Nibbana and teaches the Dhamma for attaining Nibbana. The Buddha has sometimes referred to himself as Sababhibhu because he has conquered everything, all passions. Though the Buddha acknowledges himself to be Sabbavidu, all-knowing, he has rejected the epithet Sabanyu, which also has the same meaning. At the time of the Buddha, Sabanyu had a special connotation, as Nigantha Nadapuda, the founder of Jainism, also claimed to be Sabanyu. Nadapuda claimed to have ever-present continuous knowledge of everything all the time, whether he was awake or asleep. The Buddha disclaims such ever-present continuous knowledge of everything. In fact, he maintains that no one can ever have knowledge of everything at one and the same time. It is an impossibility. It is possible to interpret the all-knowing, Sabbavidu aspect of the Buddha's knowledge in terms of the definition of Sabba, all, everything, as given in the Sabba Sutta. According to this definition, everything means the 5 sense faculties and their corresponding objects, plus the mind and the corresponding mental phenomena. In this sutta, the Buddha challenges anybody to give a more comprehensive definition of everything. The Buddha's ability to know something was such that he had to direct his attention to the desired object in order to know it as it really is. The Buddha clearly says that he can recollect as far back as he wishes through his retrocognitive knowledge, and his clairvoyant abilities are similarly wish-bound. He does not have a mirror-like knowledge or vision where everything is automatically reflected. Here we are reminded of the incident when the Buddha decided to preach the Dhamma. He thought of Alara Kalama first to preach the Dhamma too, but he did not know that Alara had died a week ago. Then he thought of Udaka Ramaputa, only to realize that he too had passed away the previous night. These episodes clearly show that the Buddha had to direct his attention if he wished to know something. These episodes bring us to the interesting question of whether it is possible for others to read the mind of the Buddha. When the Buddha was disinclined to preach the doctrine, Sahampati, the great Brahma, immediately knew this, and he came and requested the Buddha to preach. According to the Brahma Samyutta, when the Buddha decided to honor the Dhamma as his teacher because he saw none capable of being his teacher in the whole world of gods and men, Brahma Sahampati appeared once again and informed him that this was the custom of previous Buddhas too, and Buddhas in the future also will do the same. When the Buddha thought of choosing Alara Kalama and Udaka Ramaputa to be his first disciples, gods informed him of their death. The Kanda Samyutta records another incident when Mahabrahma read the thoughts of the Buddha and appeared before him to plead on behalf of some errant monks. According to the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, when the Buddha was going through the jhanic process in ascending and descending orders just before attaining parinibbana, Anuruddha knew the jhanic process he was going through. All these episodes point to the fact that at least certain aspects of the Buddha's mind were accessible to other Arahants with thought-reading ability and certain superhuman beings. Another episode recorded in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta shows that all aspects of the Buddha's mind are not known even to the most eminent Arahants. Sariputta once told the Buddha that he was convinced that there has never been, there will never be, and there is not at present any other recluse or Brahmin who is more distinguished in enlightenment than the Buddha. The Buddha then asked Sariputta whether he had read the minds of all past, present, and future Buddhas, and known their virtue to be such and such, evam sila, their concentration to be such and such, evam dhamma, their wisdom to be such and such, evam panya, their mode of living to be such and such, evam vihari, and their emancipation to be such and such, evam vimutta. Sariputta replied that he has no such knowledge and that he was only making a reasonable inference. All this evidence clearly points to the fact that there is no human or superhuman being, not even an Arahant, who can fully read the mind of the Buddha. But of course, the Buddha has the ability to read the minds of all others, including Arahants. Incomparable authority. The Pali Canon mentions 5 types of vision that the Buddha has. The first is Mamsakaku, the normal human vision consisting of the physical faculty of sight. According to the Lakkhana Sutta, the Buddha possesses a perfect pair of deep blue eyes with long eyelashes because, as a human being fulfilling the perfections requisite for Buddhahood, he looked at others with pleasant, kind eyes, honest and uncritical eyes. The second type of vision is Dibbakaku, the divine vision or clairvoyance, the most important function of which is the ability to see the passing away and rebirth of beings according to their respective karma. The third is Panyakaku, the vision of insight, which enabled the Buddha to see things as they really are, the impermanent, unsatisfactory, and non-substantial nature of everything. The fourth is Buddhakaku, the Buddha vision. When the Buddha surveyed the world with this vision, he saw people with a lesser and a greater degree of defilements, people with refined and dull spiritual faculties. The fifth is Samantakaku, which we venture to translate as pan vision. It is possible to infer that this vision refers to the ability to see a problem or an issue in its entirety, as Samanta means entire or all round. Moreover, Mahabrahma addresses the Buddha as Samantakaku when he entreats him in allegorical terms to ascend to the top of the Dhamma mansion and behold the suffering mass of humanity. The last two visions are never attributed to Arahants and remain the sole province of the Buddha. The Pali Canon contains interesting material to draw a distinction between the enlightenment experience of the Buddha and that of the Arahant. The Chabisodhana Sutta enumerates several criteria of arahantship, which give a clear idea of what the Buddha expected of his disciples who have reached the ultimate goal of realization. These criteria comprise the unshakable freedom of the mind from the influence of the senses, from hankering after the constituents of personality, from craving for elements constituting the world, from the yearning for the internal and external sense spheres, and from the bias of the notion of I and mine. One of the most comprehensive accounts of the enlightenment experience of an arahant is given in the Maha Asapura Sutta. According to this, the adept who has attained to the fourth jhana gains first retrocognition and then clairvoyance. Then he directs his mind to the knowledge of the destruction of defilements. In this process, he gains first-hand knowledge of suffering, its cause, its elimination, and the path leading to its elimination. He understands what mental defilements are, their origin, cessation, and the path leading to their cessation. When knowing thus, the mind, citta, is freed from the defilements of sense pleasures, the desire for continued existence, and ignorance. In him who is released, thus, there arises the knowledge of freedom. Birth is destroyed. The higher life has been successfully lived. One's duty has been done. There is no more of this continued existence. Just as a man standing beside a pool of clear, unsullied water would see the shells, pebbles, and fish in the water, the adept would see, clearly and directly, suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path leading to its cessation. This could very well be a description of the Buddha's enlightenment experience too, but scattered in the Pali Canon, there are various biographical descriptions of his enlightenment that suggest that the above was only one of its aspects. It appears that the Buddha's enlightenment was a full, multifaceted, rich experience that could be explained from various angles. In the Mahasaccaka Sutta, the Buddha relates that he realized retrocognition during the first watch of the night, clairvoyance during the second watch, and the knowledge of the destruction of defilements during the third watch. Therefore, it is clear that enlightenment is not a sudden flash, but a gradual unfolding of human potentialities when conditions for it are ripe. It can be compared to the gradual unfolding of petals in the blossoming of a flower. Buddha's unique insight and vision. In the Khandha Samyutta, the Buddha says, "So long as I did not understand the satisfaction, asada, the evil consequences, adinava, and the escape, nissarana, from the five aggregates of grasping, so long I did not claim supreme enlightenment." The Mahapadana Sutta states that the mind of Vipassana Buddha attained emancipation from defilements when contemplating the rise and fall of the five aggregates of grasping. Thus, knowledge and vision into the five aggregates is another aspect of the Enlightenment experience. According to the Vedana Samyutta, the Buddha did not claim enlightenment until he gained full vision into all aspects of feelings. What is feeling? What is its origin, its cessation, the path leading to its cessation, its satisfaction, its evil consequences, and escape therefrom? As all beings are bound to samsara because of their attachment to pleasures, and pleasures are but pleasurable sensations, it is only logical that one has to have a thorough knowledge of all sensations, including pleasurable sensations, if one wants to make an end of samsara. Therefore, the Buddha's enlightenment experience comprised a thoroughgoing realization of all aspects of feeling too. The Salayatana Samyutta records another aspect. According to this, the Buddha did not claim enlightenment in the world of gods and men so long as he did not realistically understand the six sense faculties and their respective objects according to the satisfaction they yield, the evil consequences they entail, and the escape therefrom. As we are attached to pleasures through the instrumentality of our sense organs, in order to gain release, we have to understand the nature of the sense faculties, sense objects, and their interrelationship. In the Nidana Samyutta, the Buddha says that vision and knowledge arose in him regarding matters not heard of before, ananusutesu dhamesu, as he contemplated the paticcasamuppada, paying attention to the causal process giving rise to suffering, and the causal process bringing about the cessation of suffering. The Anguttara Nikaya explains the gradual deepening of Dibakaku, clairvoyance, as an aspect of the Enlightenment experience. There are 8 stages in this process of gradual development extending from pre-Enlightenment days up to the Enlightenment. The Buddha says that so long as he did not understand these 8 stages, he did not claim enlightenment in the world of gods and men. The most important and the most famous account of the Enlightenment experience of the Buddha is recorded in the Vinaya Mahavagga, and this comprises the full comprehension of the 4 Noble Truths. As this statement is of great significance, it is recorded below in detail. The Buddha says that 1. Wisdom and knowledge arose in him regarding truths never heard of before, and he was able to isolate the problem of the noble truth of suffering. 2. He understood that the truth of suffering must be fully comprehended, and 3. That the truth of suffering has been fully comprehended. 2. Wisdom and knowledge arose in him regarding the cause of suffering. 2. He understood that this cause of suffering must be eliminated, and 3. That this cause of suffering has been eliminated. 3. Wisdom and knowledge arose in him that the cessation of suffering is a possibility, whereas 6. He understood that the cessation of suffering must be realized, and the 3. That the cessation of suffering has been realized. 4. Wisdom and knowledge arose in him regarding the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Like, he understood that this path must be developed, and 3. That this path has been developed. The Buddha says that he did not claim to have attained supreme enlightenment until he realized the 4 Noble Truths, each according to the threefold ramifications, to Parivada. Thus, the 4 truths run into 12 details, Devadasakara. This was such a novel realization that he uses the phrase, truths never heard of before, Pube Ananu Sutesu Dhamesu, with each of the above 12 statements. The wisdom that arose was so profound that he uses 5 terms to describe different aspects of this deep spiritual awakening. Vision arose, Kakum Udapadi. Wisdom arose, Jnanam Udapadi. Insight arose, Panya Udapadi. Knowledge arose, Vijja Udapadi. And illumination arose, Aloko Udapadi. Conclusion. We are now in a position to compare the enlightenment experience of the Arahant with that of the Buddha. The Maha-Asapura account cited earlier in this essay, which can be regarded as one of the best descriptions of an Arahant's enlightenment experience, seems to fade into insignificance when compared with the rich, multifaceted enlightenment experience of the Buddha. Nowhere has the Pali Canon attributed insight into the sense faculties, sense objects, sensations, etc., as an enlightenment experience of an Arahant. As stated in the Chabisodhana Sutta, it is very probable that they realistically understand the nature of sense faculties, sense objects, elements, etc., that these phenomena are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and non-substantial, but they may not gain insight into the inner workings of these phenomena. The Arahant's enlightenment experience is introduced by the phrase Yathabhutam Pajanati, realistically understands, whereas the Buddha's enlightenment experience is expressed as vision arose, wisdom arose, insight arose, knowledge arose, illumination arose. The Pali Canon never uses this phraseology to refer to the realization of an Arahant. The realization of the Four Noble Truths by an Arahant is also expressed in terms of realistic understanding. But the Buddha's vision into the Four Truths is described in 12 details consisting of the threefold ramifications with respect to each of the Four Truths. The simile used in the Maha-Asapura Sutta to describe the enlightenment experience of the Arahant is that of a pond of crystal clear water, where a man standing on its bank sees the pebbles, shells, etc., in its bed and shoals of fish swimming in the water. But the Buddha's enlightenment experience is like the panoramic view one gets from the summit of a mountain, and this is exactly the imagery Mahabrahma uses to describe the Buddha's enlightenment experience. We are not in a position to conjecture whether the various facets of the enlightenment experience of the Buddha had a chronological and a hierarchical order, and if so, what that order was. It could also have been an experience like circular vision, as when one is at the top of a mountain where the scenery on the east is different from the scenery in the west, and the scenery in the north different from that of the south. However different the sceneries may be from the different directions, all the scenes constitute one integrated experience of a person standing on a vantage point. The scanty evidence gleaned from the Pali Canon seems to favor a combination of both these patterns for the Buddha's enlightenment experience. The experience has started with a chronological hierarchy, as according to the Mahasakaka Sutta, the higher knowledges of retrocognition, clairvoyance, and the destruction of defilements were realized during the first, second, and third watches of the night, respectively. The other facets of the enlightenment experience may be parts of the spiritual panorama seen in different directions from the vantage point of reality. Whatever the pattern may be, an Arahant's enlightenment is a much less significant, much less dramatic experience than that of the Buddha, which is so profound, multifaceted, rich, and unique. In conclusion, it can be stated that the Buddha would have realized a far more profound worldview than he chose to preach to humanity. As that knowledge was far too complicated for ordinary comprehension, and as it was irrelevant for the solution of the human problem of suffering, keeping that profound knowledge as the framework within which to work, the Buddha would have preached to humanity how best we could order our life to achieve harmony and peace in such a world. This harmony at the highest level is Nibbana. Those who followed him lacked the profound worldview, but learned the practice for the attainment of lasting peace and emancipation.